Hi everyone. Have you ever seen someone go from homeless to one of the top administrators for one of the top financial institutions in North America? Doesn't happen very often. My name is Caleb. I'm a 23-year-old. I currently live here in this lovely apartment with my boyfriend. I My greatest achievement is not necessarily one event. Rather, it is a series of events that was kind of enabled by my different set of accolades and traits. Just as a backstory, what happened was I was homeless, had moved to Vancouver in Canada. At that time, I was at the University of Victoria, and I was homeless because I came out to my family and they were not very, very happy about the fact that I had came out as gay. So they cut off what funding I had, and as a university student at an international school, it was very, very, very difficult. So I was homeless very, very quickly. I lived in my dorm until I could pay it no longer. And from there, I hit the streets in my car. Now, something that I was armed with that's a little different than most people that were homeless was that I already have a degree. So, why is this degree, this associate's in general education, why is this important to this story? Well, you see, when I hit the streets, I was I was lonesome. I was tired. In fact, as you can see here on the bed my bed that I've cleared off, there is some jeans. I had this shirt. I had this jacket, which has reflective interiors to keep me warm. And then I had this scarf that my grandmother gave me. And now I have this beautiful luxury apartment. So where do we go? Well, the greatest achievement I've ever had in my life was pulling an entire 180 from the streets to being a network operations administrator without having any kind of CS degree or anything like that. So what happened? Well, it's on the streets. I actually started working in a warehouse super late at night. They didn't care that I had any kind of education. They just cared that, oh, you used to be an athlete, great. So you have some muscle, you can lift. So I did basic labor jobs, like working in the warehouse from like 3 in the morning till 2 in the afternoon. It was a brutal, brutal shift because I am not a morning person. And that, if you can imagine, if you're not a morning person and they're asking you to wake up at 3 a.m., it's not a lovely scene. It's not a pretty Caleb. So I eventually started doing what I'm really good at, which is speaking, networking, engaging with locals. And I found out some people that were in banking. Now, I had worked as a bank teller for like 6 months, but didn't really have any financial experience where I could just walk into a credit union or a bank and say, "Hey, hire me." And that was when one of my coworkers pointed me to a dinner party where there were actually a lot of credit union employees from Coast Capital Savings, and we got along and we fit in really well. I told them I do have a pretty strong, lots of computer experience. I was a little gaming nerd for the longest period of time, still am, with computers. And so they said, okay, well, you may not have the whole financial experience, but you know the technology, a little bit about banking, we'll train the rest of it. So got hired by Coast Capital Savings after 3 months of living in my car. And it was an experience. So how does that look? Well, the first month living, my old roommate would laugh, but we had this basement suite, right, for the first month, and I was literally using the rest of my savings to pay for that one little basement suite. And what ended up happening was I got hired by Coast, and my wages went from $12 an hour to $18.50 an hour. Okay, we're making more money. So what happened next? Well, I used this degree. I went and very quickly, my manager recognized that I had a really strong talent for teaching people and engaging people and being able to talk to them in a language that they understand, being able to adapt to what they need. And so I did. I went and I jumped straight in and I would talk to people about their finances, but I wasn't necessarily the best sales consultant as much as I was someone who was really good at talking to people and teaching them how to make a budget, how to manage their credit wisely, and how to get engaged a little bit more with with the credit union that I was working for. And that's when the promotions started. So I got promoted to handle branch marketing and public relations, which is really good at. People had questions about outside marketing material, things that maybe had seen on TV. Maybe they had a complaint, whatever, all encompassing. I was the person that they came and talked to. And then I got promoted to staff trainer. And so I started training all the new staff in the branch. So mind you, I still only have like 8 months of experience if we include the 6 months of teller experience at this point. And now I'm training people. And I'm training them how to understand credit. We're training them how to use formulas manually without having to go to like some fancy calculator online, how to calculate interest. How to predict credit scores. What's the difference between Canada's Compass score and America's FICO score, and how come they're different, and and how to talk to Americans and Canadians that they're not the same score. And if you get a credit card in the States and in Canada, those two are going to report to two entirely different credit scores. So you can't use your American credit in Canada, you can't use your Canadian credit in America. Teaching people how to do stuff. And this talent for teaching people quickly garnered me some attention. I did that for around 6 or 7 months, still working in the branch, still helping people with whatever they needed inside the branch. But I also started helping other branches, teaching staff at other branches. My manager would send me over to another branch and say, hey, they have a new staff member, they want you to go train them. And I said, sure, I can do that. So I taught them sales training, how to communicate, how to engage with people, where to say certain things, when to not say certain things, how to say it, where to say it inside the branch. There's a time and a place for approaching someone. May not be from that side hallway, might be from the front door. Depends on you. So teaching people how to do these things was very important. And then I got promoted again. So I got promoted into the administrative back offices of Coast Capital. I actually had my own desk in my own office, my own view of the mountains. It was fantastic. And I got assigned to training not only administrators, but I was also doing a lot of administrative work. I quickly learned how to decipher the different things of the administrative back office as I was working in ABM networks, which encompasses a lot, honestly, even though it sounds like it's just about ATMs. It's honestly a ton of stuff, from fraud investigations to credit inquiries, and just a gigantic conglomerated mess of point of sale transactions, wires, whole kit and caboodle. So I was really, really good at fraud investigations, very, very good at talking to people, approaching people. So a lot of the stuff there was a group of us, there was about 8. In the office at any given point, there was only 5, because we rotated in and out based on who got what shift, because we could get in there at 7. And some people would stay till 2, and then there was people who got in there at 10 and then stayed till 5, basically covering each other so that no one person got burned out on the sheer amount of paperwork that a lot of us entailed. Well, I was that morning crew. I clearly never learned from the warehouse. And I was the person who handled a lot of the fraud and handled posting adjustments. And quickly, I was taught when I assumed the role that communicating with outside customers is not something we do. And that's because 9 times out of 10, they're super angry. Now, we can, of course, communicate with them about adjustments for posting and fraud investigations and things like that. That's totally within my power. But I went to the next level of talking to people, reaching out to people, going that extra mile, because not just seeing how someone got into debt, but why they got into debt. And why am I now calling you? And how can we fix that so that I don't have to call you again? And then I got promoted again. So at this point, I was asked to start creating programs and certain things put together, got put into social committees on my floor, was handed the Pride committee because I was one of the gay kids on the floor. Not a gay kid anymore, but 23, still sort of. And started taking over all these things. And from the time that I had reached that point where I was suddenly heading all these committees and creating programs to when I was homeless was actually in under a year. So why is this my greatest accomplishment? Well, I did it all without anyone else's help. And I consider that great because I was an excellent swimmer in high school. I could have talked about being a USA swimmer. I was great with my academics. I averaged A's and B's in all my classes. I could have talked about, I survived my mom dying from cancer and being the dad of a house of 4 kids. There's a lot of other accomplishments, but a lot of these were already assumed, things that I had already been trained on for years and years and years and years that took a lot of practice. I had no practice for being homeless. I had no practice for how to deal with it. I had no practice for anything like that. My family wasn't going to help me. My closest family members that were willing to help me didn't have the finances to get it to Canada. To send a wire alone at most banks will cost you between $30 and $50. So it wasn't something that a lot of people had the access to do. And I didn't have a bank account when I was homeless because I was homeless. So it was crushing and it was frustrating. And I managed to pull myself up and out and achieved so very much by being myself. And I think that is my greatest accomplishment to this date. Not because it was a fancy award or because I got first place in something like a swim meet in one of the heats that I was in. I was able to pull myself up literally from drabs all the way to the top through just sheer perseverance, a good amount of getting myself right in front of the right people. Consider that my greatest accomplishment because that could have been it for me. That could have been it. There would not have been another rest of my life. That could have just been it. I was homeless there in Vancouver, living out of my car, sleeping on friends' couches. Could have ended there as a warehouse worker, and there's nothing wrong with that. There isn't. My warehouse colleagues were some of the most fantastic people I've ever met. They could cook better than I could. Their kids were smarter than I am because they place such a high value on education. And I could have ended it there. That could have been the story of Caleb. All these accolades as a teenager. His mom died of cancer. He had to be a dad to 4 kids. And then his best friend committed suicide. And he ended up a warehouse worker. And that could have easily been the end of the story because of all those emotional fronts. But that's not what happened. The greatest accomplishment that I ever had involved a great deal of an education degree, some scarves, a very warm coat, and getting myself up off the ground. And that's, to this date, one of the greatest things I have ever achieved. And it's something not only that I'm thankful for, it wasn't just me. I had the amount of people that put their trust, their faith in me, recognizing natural talents that I had, being able to network my way through and having people actually listen was the greatest part about it. This video is almost 15 minutes long, not because I wanted to bore you or be drab. It's 15 minutes long because this greatest achievement that I've ever done was a story. It's something that took time. It took nearly 11 months for me to go from rags to riches, from having a car that was falling apart and on my last amount of clothes and my last meal to having a luxury apartment. That was the greatest change I have ever had, and it's something I wanted to take the time to share to you in its full entirety because it's not something I can sum up in 5 minutes. Thank you all for listening. I hope it was valuable to your time. If you have any questions, if you have any comments, complaints, or concerns, please, by all means, reach out to me. If you're a tech student, if you just happen to watch this video on YouTube and you're wondering what the hell this video was made for, this was for a class project. It was very therapeutic for me to talk this out. It took lots of reruns and retrials to actually cut it down to 15 minutes. So thank you for listening. I appreciate you taking the time to listen, and I hope to maybe make another video and see you all again soon.